The winter storm had arrived like a wild beast, sudden and unrelenting. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, suffocating the daylight and bringing with them a biting wind that seemed to freeze everything it touched. The small rural highway, usually quiet in the winter months, was now blanketed with snow, the road nearly invisible under the thick layers of white. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the sharp sting of ice that cut through even the thickest coat. It was a storm that demanded respect and left no room for mistakes. Lying near the edge of the road, barely visible against the vast white landscape, was a young German shepherd puppy. His fur, once a glossy brown and black, was now stiff and matted from the snow and the bitter cold. His little body shivered, not just from the freezing temperatures, but from the pain that coursed through him. His right paw was badly injured, the swelling almost grotesque, and it throbbed with every breath he took. The puppy tried to move, to stand, but his small, trembling body couldn't support him. Every time he attempted to lift himself, the pain shot through him like a lightning strike, and he collapsed back onto the snow, helpless and weak. With the storm raging around him, the puppy could only lie there, his bright, fearful eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. His once hopeful spirit was slowly fading as the snow continued to fall, burying him further into the frozen earth. The cold was relentless, seeping into his bones, numbing him with each passing minute. His breathing grew shallow, the effort it took to stay conscious becoming too much. Every now and then, his small body would jerk as though trying to shake off the sleepiness, but it was a losing battle. His world was slowly turning dark, the edges of his vision blurring with the overwhelming cold. The sound of distant tires on the road was the only thing that kept him from slipping into unconsciousness. But each time a vehicle appeared through the swirling snow, it would speed by without a second glance. No one stopped. No one even noticed. The puppy's whimpers were swallowed by the storm, his desperate cries lost in the wind. He could barely muster enough strength to lift his head, his mind growing foggy with each second. It was as if the world had forgotten him. But he wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Deep inside, something still fought to survive, a small flicker of hope that told him he wasn't done yet. Not yet. The hours passed in a blur. Each one seemed to stretch longer than the last. The puppy's once bright eyes were now dull with exhaustion, the light fading from them like a dimming star. His small body was frozen beneath the weight of the snow, and his breath came in shallow, labored gasps. Every muscle ached, every inch of him seemed to be screaming in pain, but there was no one there to listen. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Snowflakes whipped around in vicious gusts, and the cold bit into the puppy's skin, threatening to steal away what little warmth he had left. The wind was so fierce that it sounded like a roar in his ears, and the world around him felt as if it was closing in. His injured paw throbbed painfully with each shallow breath, the broken bones sending sharp, stabbing jolts of pain through his fragile body. He tried to move again, hoping, praying that somehow he could find the strength to escape the suffocating cold. But his muscles were too weak, his tiny legs too unsteady. The snow had become his prison, and the road, now far too distant, seemed to mock him. He had no voice left to bark, no strength to call out for help. His whimpers were barely audible, lost to the howling storm that swallowed everything in its path. It seemed as though the world was indifferent to his suffering, as if no one could hear the silent plea for rescue that hung in the air around him. The cars that passed by seemed like ghosts. They appeared out of nowhere, speeding along the icy highway, and just as quickly disappeared, leaving only tire tracks behind. The puppy's eyes flicked toward each one in a silent plea, his heart racing with a burst of hope each time, only to see the vehicles continue on, unaware of the life struggling on the side of the road. The sound of an engine, the brief flash of headlights, it was all he had, the only thing that kept his fading hope alive. But it was never enough. Time was a blur to him now. It was impossible to know how long he had been lying there, frozen, alone, and in pain. Minutes? Hours? Days? The cold had made it difficult to think clearly, and the storm made everything feel distant and unreal. All he knew was that, with each passing moment, he was slipping further away. If someone didn't stop soon, He feared he might not make it through the night. Still, somewhere deep within him, something refused to give up. A flicker of life, however faint, fighting against the cold and the darkness. He wasn't ready to die here. Not like this. Miles away from the helpless puppies, Sam sat in a small, dimly lit diner, sipping his coffee. The smell of grease and burnt toast filled the air, the kind of scent that made the place feel worn and familiar. It was the kind of morning where everything seemed routine, except for the restlessness that had settled in Sam's chest. He'd been driving the same long, familiar routes for years, but that day, something inside him stirred. He couldn't explain it, but he felt the urge to take a detour. Something in the back of his mind told him that the path he usually took wasn't meant to be traveled today. The storm had already begun to whip through the countryside, dusting the road with thick, heavy snowflakes. Other drivers at the diner were talking about it, but none seemed particularly concerned. Sam, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the weather was about to get worse. He checked the truck's GPS and saw the familiar stretch of highway he was supposed to take, a straight line that would carry him to his destination. But something inside him told him to take the back roads, away from the main highway, even though it meant a longer journey. He set his mug down with a quiet thud and glanced out the window. The gray skies seemed endless, a heavy fog wrapping the world in a cold, oppressive silence. Sam stood, tossing a few bills on the table and pulling his jacket tighter around his broad shoulders. His truck keys jingled in his hand as he walked to his rig, the familiar rumble of the engine comforting him, almost like an old friend. As he drove, he found his thoughts drifting. He thought about his family back home, his dog, and the long stretches of highway he had traveled. But there was a nagging thought in the back of his mind, a feeling that today something would be different. The snow intensified as he turned off the main road, the wind howling against his truck. The visibility grew worse, the road almost impossible to make out in the heavy storm. But Sam didn't mind. He had seen worse. He'd driven through blizzards, ice storms, and fog so thick he couldn't see the end of the hood. He was used to the unpredictability of the road. But as he drove further down the snow-covered path, something caught his eye. It was small at first, a dark speck against the white landscape, barely noticeable through the swirling snow. But something about it felt out of place. Sam slowed his truck, squinting through the windshield. There, near the edge of the road, something moved, a small figure huddled against the storm. Sam's heart skipped a beat. Sam's foot instinctively pressed harder on the brake pedal, his truck slowing down as his eyes locked onto the small figure ahead. The storm made it hard to see clearly, but the shape was unmistakable now. It was a puppy. A tiny German shepherd, barely a few months old, lying in the snow by the side of the road. Sam's heart dropped as he caught sight of the dog's injured paw, its body stiff from the cold. The poor thing seemed barely alive. He pulled his truck over to the side of the road, the tires crunching against the snow as he parked in a hurry. The storm raged around him, but he barely noticed the freezing wind that whipped through the air. His only focus was the small creature that had caught his attention. Without hesitation, Sam threw open the door of the truck and jumped out. The snow hit him like a slap to the face, but he barely flinched. His boots sank deep into the snow as he rushed toward the puppy, the sound of his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt down beside the trembling dog, and for a moment, he just stared. The puppy's eyes were wide with fear, and its breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. Its fur was covered in ice, the small body shaking uncontrollably from both the cold and pain. "Hey there, little one," Sam murmured softly, trying to calm the dog. His voice was steady, but his hands were trembling with urgency. The puppy's eyes locked onto his face, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of recognition. The small dog didn't try to bite or run. It just lay there, vulnerable and cold, too weak to do anything else. Sam gently reached down and scooped the puppy into his arms, cradling the fragile body against his chest. The dog's warmth seeped through Sam's jacket, but it was faint and fleeting. He could feel the puppy's body shivering, and he knew he didn't have much time to act. The storm was getting worse, and the temperature was dropping fast. The puppy needed warmth and fast. "Don't worry, I've got you," Sam whispered, his voice low and reassuring as he carried the dog back to the truck. He opened the passenger door with his free hand and carefully placed the puppy onto the seat. The dog let out a soft whimper, but it didn't resist. Sam quickly climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine with one hand while cranking the heat all the way up with the other. He glanced down at the small creature, his heart heavy with a sense of responsibility. "We're going to make it," Sam promised quietly, as the warmth of the truck began to fill the air around them. The puppy's head drooped slightly as it rested, its body still trembling from the cold. But for the first time since Sam had found him, the puppy wasn't alone anymore. The truck's engine roared to life, its heat blasting through the cabin. But even with the warmth filling the space, the puppy's small body remained tense and shivering. Sam kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the puppy, cradling him gently against his chest. The little dog's fur, once soft and thick, was now stiff with frost, and Sam could feel the icy chill radiating off him. He could see the puppy's trembling muscles, the tiny ribs that seemed too fragile for such a young creature. "Stay with me, little guy," Sam muttered under his breath, trying to keep the worry from creeping into his voice. He glanced at the puppy's paw again, noting the blood that had begun to freeze around the injury. It wasn't just frostbite, Sam realized. The paw was clearly swollen, and the puppy had been walking on it for who knew how long. It had to have hurt. A lot. Sam's eyes flicked to the road ahead, his hands tightening on the wheel as he navigated the treacherous, snow-covered path. The storm had worsened, visibility reduced to nearly nothing. The wind howled outside the truck, and the swirling snow made it hard to see more than a few feet in front of him. But Sam wasn't going to stop now. He knew that if he could just get to the nearest town and find a vet, the puppy had a chance. A real chance. "You're not alone anymore," Sam whispered again, glancing down at the tiny face that was now resting against his chest. The puppy's breath had slowed, but he still seemed fragile, barely hanging on. Sam could see that his fight was becoming harder with each passing minute, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of determination that made Sam believe he wouldn't give up just yet. The truck rattled along the road, its tires crunching against the snow and ice. Sam knew the highway was still miles away, but he also knew that the clinic he'd called ahead of time was open late. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only option he had. He had no idea how long the puppy had been out in the cold, but he knew that every minute was crucial now. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. With each mile, Sam glanced over at the puppy, watching his chest rise and fall in slow, rhythmic breaths. The warmth of the truck was starting to work, the trembling subsiding just slightly. Sam could feel his own tension begin to ease, but he didn't dare let his guard down. There was still a long way to go. "Hang in there, little one," Sam said softly, as if the words alone could carry the puppy through the storm. "We'll make it, just a little longer." The storm howled outside, the wind so fierce that it felt like it could tear the truck apart. Sam's grip on the wheel tightened, his knuckles white as he carefully maneuvered the rig down the snow-packed road. The night had settled in, the sky now a blanket of thick, swirling clouds that made it feel as though the world itself was closing in on him. The roads were treacherous, barely visible through the wall of snow. Sam could barely make out the outline of trees and road signs, his eyes constantly shifting between the road and the small, fragile puppy resting in the passenger seat beside him. With every mile he traveled, Sam's anxiety only grew. His eyes flicked over to the puppy every few seconds, his heart heavy with worry. The dog, who had been shivering uncontrollably when Sam first found him, was now lying still in the seat, his small body curled up. Though the warmth from the truck's heater had eased some of the tremors, the puppy's breathing was still labored. Sam couldn't shake the thought that time was running out. He had no idea how long the dog had been exposed to the elements before he found him, but it was clear that the cold had taken its toll. Sam glanced at the dashboard clock. The vet's clinic would be closing soon, but they had promised to stay open for him. His phone had no signal, and there were no other trucks on the road to help guide him through the storm. The only thing he could rely on now was his own steady hands and his gut feeling that this puppy needed him. "Come on, buddy," Sam muttered, the words directed at the puppy, though he knew the dog couldn't understand. "Just a little further. We're almost there." His eyes darted back to the road, squinting into the swirling snow as the truck's headlights pierced through the darkness. Each passing second seemed to stretch into eternity as the storm grew more violent. Sam had driven through blizzards before, but this one felt different, more dangerous, more unpredictable. Still, he couldn't afford to slow down. The puppy was depending on him. Minutes felt like hours as he navigated the winding road, keeping his speed as steady as possible. He glanced over at the puppy again, who now seemed a little more alert, though his body was still weak. Sam could see the dog's eyes fluttering slightly, fighting to stay awake. That small, flickering spark of life made Sam push forward, urging the truck to move faster, even though the storm fought him every inch of the way. "We're gonna make it, I promise," Sam whispered, his voice breaking the silence of the truck. "Just hold on." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the faint outline of the small town appeared ahead. Sam's heart surged with hope as he saw the lights of the vet clinic through the storm. He was close now, very close. The truck's tires crunched on the snow as Sam eased into the small parking lot of the vet clinic, the headlights casting a dim glow across the building. The storm still raged, but the sight of the clinic brought an unexpected wave of relief. He had made it. The puppy had made it. Sam quickly parked and jumped out of the truck, rushing to the passenger side to scoop up the little dog once more. The puppy was still weak, but Sam could feel his small body trembling in his arms. The clinic's door opened just as Sam arrived, and a middle-aged woman in a white coat appeared. Her face was kind but determined, and Sam didn't waste any time. I found him in the snow," Sam said breathlessly, his voice laced with urgency. "He's hurt. Please, help him." The woman immediately stepped aside, ushering Sam into the warmth of the clinic. "Bring him right in," she said, her voice calm but firm, as though she'd seen countless situations like this before. Sam followed her through the door, the warmth of the building a stark contrast to the freezing cold outside. The puppy whimpered in his arms, and Sam gently cradled him closer. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and medicine, a sterile scent that somehow provided a sense of comfort. Sam was nearly shaking with exhaustion, but he didn't care. The puppy's survival was all that mattered. The vet quickly took the puppy from Sam's arms and placed him on the examination table. The cold air in the clinic made Sam shiver, but he stayed by the table, his eyes fixed on the puppy, unwilling to look away for even a second. The vet and her assistant worked quickly, checking the puppy's vitals and carefully assessing the injury to his paw. Sam could see the concern in their eyes as they moved with precision, but they didn't seem panicked. They had seen dogs in worse shape. After what felt like an eternity, the vet turned to Sam, her expression serious but not without hope. "He's hurt, but he's a fighter," she said, her voice steady. "He's got a broken paw and some frostbite, but it looks like he'll make it through. We'll take care of him, get him warm, and start him on fluids. He's in good hands." Sam let out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since he found the puppy. His heart soared, relief flooding through him. The puppy was going to survive. "Thank you," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found him." The vet smiled softly. "You saved his life. Now let us do our part." As the puppy was carried into the back room for treatment, Sam stood still, staring at the door. The storm outside continued to rage, but for the first time in hours, Sam felt a sense of peace wash over him. The little dog had been given a second chance, a chance to live, to heal, and to find a home. And Sam was determined to make sure that he would never be alone again. The hours that followed were filled with tension and hope as Sam waited in the small, sterile waiting room. The storm outside showed no signs of slowing, but for Sam, the weather no longer seemed to matter. He had done what he could. Now it was up to the skilled hands of the vet to work their magic. He had never felt so helpless, but at the same time, a quiet sense of satisfaction settled over him. He had found the puppy. He had given him a chance. After what felt like an eternity, the vet finally emerged from the back room. Sam stood up immediately, his heart pounding in his chest. "How is he?" Sam asked, his voice tight with concern. He could barely contain the fear that gripped him, the fear that the little dog might still not make it. The vet smiled warmly, putting Sam's fears to rest. He's a strong little guy. We've managed to stabilize him. The frostbite is mild, and the broken paw will heal in time. We've given him fluids, and he's responding well. He should be just fine after a few days of care. Sam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief flooding through him like a wave. Thank you. Thank you so much, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. He had never expected to find himself so attached to a dog he had only just met, but the bond that had formed in such a short time was undeniable. The vet nodded, smiling gently. It's our job, but we're glad he's in good hands now. She paused for a moment, glancing over at the door to the back room. You're welcome to come see him. We're keeping him here for the night, but he's already starting to get more comfortable. Sam followed her into the back room, his heart swelling as he saw the puppy lying on a soft bed, a blanket draped over him. The little dog's eyes were closed, but he was breathing steadily, his chest rising and falling in a calm rhythm. A small IV was attached to his paw, and he had a thick bandage around his injured leg. But despite everything, he looked peaceful. The storm outside seemed far away now, as if the world had shifted in those few hours. Sam stepped closer, kneeling down beside the puppy's bed. He reached out and gently stroked the soft fur on the dog's head. The puppy stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw Sam, his tail gave a small wag, a sign of recognition. It was enough to bring tears to Sam's eyes. I'm here, buddy, Sam whispered softly, his voice thick with emotion. You're safe now. You're home. The puppy's tail wagged again, and Sam smiled, knowing that their journey together was just beginning. He had rescued the puppy from the snow, but in truth, it was the puppy who had rescued him, filling a void he hadn't even known was there. From that moment on, Sam knew they would never be apart. The bond they shared had been forged in the storm, and it was unbreakable.